Are you going, Rachel? Awesome. Mike, are you going to go?
Which one?
Here is an author in their element, having some fun with their craft, delivering some of the best combat scenes I've read lately.
That never wanders far from my mind.
I think that this might be one of the single best representations of dragons that I've read in the fantasy genre.
This book is a dark, fascinating, disgusting, wonderful, nauseating, intriguing, effed up, heartfelt, brutal character study
that recaptures the magic of far-flung galaxies, grand ideas, and more.
There's so much this book gets right. Like any good map, you're aware of the destination it's leading you towards, but the way it takes you there is very pretty indeed.
An all-consuming dreamscape, the likes of Polar Morpheus.
It's a neo-retro futuristic fest, making Venice's gunslinger goes hard.
So are we live? Are we live now? I think we're live now.
Yeah.
Looks like it.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it says alive or live, not alive. That's questionable. Hi, everybody. This is actually only, it looks like the second panel for the TBRCon 2024. And it's called Finding a Cover Artist and Designer with some people, some good people. Thank God, because you won't learn anything from me. So why don't we start just by with some introductions. Let's start with Isaac. Who are you?
Thanks, Dyrk.
And why are you here?
Sure, that's an interesting question. So I'm a new author, coming out with my first book, The Dragon Legion, in a couple of months, and I guess I'm here to be the new person in the gang.
Okay. And you have your debut coming out soon, correct? Is that what you just said, or did I miss that part? That's awesome.
So hopefully coming out in March or April.
Okay. So you'll have a good perspective on a new author having to go through the process of getting a cover done, finding an artist and designer from the very first fresh perspective. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Apparently my mic was muted for a little bit. Okay. Alyssa.
Hey. So I'm an illustrator working in the San Francisco Bay Area. My day job is doing Google Doodle illustrations. And my freelance job is doing cover illustrations for fantasy and sci-fi books. So I would assume that part is why I'm here, to have a little bit on the art side.
How many book covers have you done, do you think?
I think last I counted maybe around 20 now. Not all of them have come out though.
Okay.
So I'd say still early, but done some.
Nice. Rachel.
Hey, yeah, I am Rachel. Obviously, I'm here because I'm an artist. I do cover art and typography art and a little bit of design work as well. In the last year, I've worked on quite a few Kickstarter special editions. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Do you have any examples lying around next to you within reach? Because your stuff is beautiful.
The only one that I have within reach
is same with you, Casey, or Alyssa. I should have said something like that, right? In the initial email, but I didn't. But I know Rachel's work from the beautiful foil designs she's done on quite a few projects that I've seen, and they're amazing. I actually have that one.
A lot of the projects that I'm in right now are still working their way through the process, so I don't have any of them to hand.
Sure.
But yeah, I have that. Obviously, I done Pale Kings and the written for Ben first of all, so
yeah,
that's sort of what got me started in doing all this. So yeah.
Right. Hold that up again. That is so gorgeous. That's the actual foil stamp on the front of that hardback book. Yeah, it's really nice. Casey?
Hello, I'm Casey Gerber. I have been in the arts and entertainment industry for about 10 years. I started as an art teacher, and then I got a degree in industrial design. So I have some graphic design, a lot of illustration. When I do book covers, I do full service illustration and graphic design. I've done about 90 independent book projects. I currently work as a graphic designer for WWE Supercard. That's a mobile game, and I've also worked at Wizards of the Coast on Magic the Gathering. So yeah, happy to be here. I'm not currently doing any freelance work, mainly just focusing on my day job, but it's nice to come and provide some perspective.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. That reminds me, there are artists who strictly do the illustration, and then there are designers who mostly do strictly the typography and design and layout for the covers. But you do both, and there are others that do both. You also do both, Rachel?
Yeah, I also do the typography as well as the design.
Okay. How about you, Alyssa? Do you?
I'm largely the illustration side. I do a lot of type in my day job, but nobody's asked me for that for the rest of the time. So.
Actually, all the artists that I worked with do just the illustration, then I get someone else to do the typography and layout and the design work. And last but not least, Michael R. Fletcher.
Hi, that's me. So I have, I guess, lost that new writer smell and replaced it with old writer smell. I've got, I don't know, 3 completed trilogies, 3 or 4 other books, and my daughter has been making fun of my artistic skills since her first crayon. So I am not an artist.
And you've got a project coming out that is a collaboration with your daughter, who's what, 14 now?
13.
13 now? Yeah. That's awesome.
She did all the illustrations, and it's with my agent right now. We'll see what happens with it.
Okay.
Cool.
That sounds like fun. And could be trad pubbed. Fancy.
Who knows?
Okay. All right. So I know that when I first wrote Paternus, my first book, I had zero idea. And I was going, I didn't know what I went and looked at. I didn't know if it was modern fantasy, if it was urban fantasy, if it was more epic fantasy, what style of cover. But I love cover art, and I used to work in the film business, and I worked with a lot of artists for anything from storyboards to just design work of many types. So I wasn't afraid to approach artists, but the idea was, where do you find them, right? I heard about ArtStation. I heard about what are some of the others like ArtStation? There are a few others, right?
Deviant.
DeviantArt, yeah.
Kara.app is a relatively new one.
I had not heard of that one. Okay. But other than that, I really just didn't know. But it can be scary figuring it out, and is it going to cost, how much is it going to cost? And what if they can't do it? What if I can't find somebody? And how do I find somebody for the kind of thing that I want? So let's start though with before an author even wants to even begins contacting an artist, what should they do? They should know have some idea of what kind of cover they want, right? By doing research of other books that are similar or in similar genres, and see what the better selling books covers look like. It's not a good idea, especially for and we're talking to indie authors now, right? Because in trad you don't do any of that stuff. So it's not a good idea to just break the mold and do a cover that does not communicate the genre that you're in as a first-time indie author. You know, you might think, oh, I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to, yeah, it's risky. It's risky to do something like that. So what process, particularly Isaac, Mike, have you gone through in the past? And what would you recommend as artists, Rachel, Casey, and Alyssa? But let's start with Isaac again. What did you do and what would you do differently?
Well, that's a good question. I actually feel guilty about this now, being on a panel talking about this, but I made the cardinal sin of starting with Fiverr, and I paid the price for that.
Did you?
So, yep.
What happened?
So I got
happened?
a design, but that's all I got. I didn't get a real cover. I didn't get paperback. I didn't get hardback. I didn't get edits. It was here picture. And ironically, talking about what you want for art in that cover, my book is going to be fantasy and really Bronze Age type fantasy. And the first cover I got had bullets on it. So that didn't really work out for me. So coming with the idea. Yeah.
And you gave them a description, right? Did you now I know that some authors actually will sketch something, or they'll have an idea of the elements that they want in it, right? Artists. And sometimes I'm sure they come to you and say, we don't know. What do you tell them you need to know if they come to you and don't know? Or what do you want to see from them?
In terms of like what I'm wanting to know is like, what's the sort of like backdrop of like your world? Like, is it set in a specific like mythology, or, you know, like narrow it down in that sort of way? Because if they have no sort of concept of how they want it to look, at least narrowing it down by the subgenre or the backdrop or the world sort of gives me a visual reference as to what I could start doing. So I think that's super important to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Casey?
Yeah, this is going to sound kind of weird because it's not visual at all. What I want to know is that you can write and you can communicate. For me, that is the biggest thing when somebody reaches out. If I'm seeing a whole bunch of typos, if I'm seeing a lot of like unnecessary description, like I've had people send me 5 or 6 pages to read, just like right when they reach out, I'm just like, I'm not going to read that. Like, I'm so sorry. So the biggest thing is like, I can bring the expertise of what should it look like, even if somebody doesn't have an idea. I'm a huge proponent of giving people homework. I will actually give you forms to fill out, but I really want to know that you can communicate. Is the biggest thing.
Oh, good to know. Alyssa?
Yeah, I'm gonna +1 that on like professionalism too. Like you kind of get a sense when you get that first email. So just sort of assessing that, and just like even beyond like if they aren't able to articulate about their book, well, I think that is okay because you can kind of like draw some of those details out. But like, do they know if they want even a front cover or wraparound? Do they know the difference between that? Like, have they done a little bit of like looking into that kind of thing? Do they know whether they want you to do the type or not? Have they looked closely at your portfolio? Do they know whether you can do that or not? Like those kinds of things. Because sometimes people be like, oh, I want this. And it's like, I don't do that though. Like that's not really my thing. So kind of just seeing like whether this person like has actually kind of looked into what they're asking for and laid those things out clearly is usually what I'm looking for. And then kind of what Rachel says, and a little blurb about like the backdrop of your world when it's set, that kind of thing is helpful, even if I don't get it in that first email.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. I wish I would have known that early on. But I kind of skipped ahead a little bit. Sorry. But those are really important things for everyone to keep in mind if they're looking for a cover artist, especially for the first time. But also, it's like, okay, but where do we find you guys? Where do we I mean, do we just search fantasy artists book covers? Do we go and peruse ArtStation, Deviant Art, and send messages through there? Which I have contacted people that way. The guy who did the banners for my website, I contacted like that, and then ended up working with him on and off and different things for over a year, and that was pretty awesome. But like Mike, you've had probably the widest variety of methods of getting a hold of artists.
There's
So
kind of one method that I use for everyone, and that's the artist falls in my lap. So my first the first self-published book, I had no idea how to find an artist. I had no idea where to look. And my wife said, my brother's wife's nephew is an artist and he wants to do some fantasy and science fiction cover art. And I was like,
right, exactly, right.
Some punk kid. But and he was. But he turned out to be Anthony DiGiovanni, who has now done a ton of like huge trad covers. He's currently like in Hollywood doing movie stuff. He did a pilot
concept design.
Yeah, concept design.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Movie and stuff.
Yeah, he did Joe Abercrombie's latest trilogy for Subterranean Press. Yeah. And you know what? I gave Bill at Subterranean his name years back. That's how he got that gig.
That's why I couldn't afford him anymore.
That's how. Well, and see, this is a funny story too, because I saw Ghosts of Tomorrow, which is a cover that John did, and I was like, immediately messaged Mike, who I had met. We were just kind of getting to know each other on Facebook, and said, Mike, who did that cover? I'm redoing the first cover for Paternus, the first book, and I need somebody. And could you give me his name and contact information? And he said no. He literally just said no. I was like, oh, come on, man. He's like, no, if you get him and he gets famous, then I won't be able to afford him anymore. And that's exactly what happened.
I know, this is all your fault.
And it's the same kind of with Felix now.
Yeah. So then Felix,
which is awesome though, right? Which
expensive.
Is awesome. I want them to make as much money as they can, but then we can't afford them anymore.
Yeah.
And then Felix, we met through Facebook too, right?
Yeah. Felix reached out to me and said, like, I'm a fan of your books. I'm an artist. He was like, I'll do a concept for you, and then you can decide after if you want to hire me. And I was like, okay, nothing to lose. Yeah. He shot me his concept sketches for the book. It was like, okay, yep.
Yeah.
And then now he's he's doing bigger and bigger projects, and his rates are sort of
he's really busy. Very busy. He's mostly busy. His prices have gone up, but not as much as I would have expected, but he's just super, super busy. Yeah. And then how did you get your next artist though? I don't even know who that. I know the name, but I don't know of him.
Yeah. I was about to start looking for an artist, and I was chatting with Argyle. Zach Argyle.
Zach, yeah.
About something totally unrelated. And he was like, oh, you should check out Andrew Molesky. He's doing some interior sketches for me. Looked at his stuff. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. Yeah. And then, now Andrew's done 2 covers for me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So artists, they just sort of magically appear.
Right.
When you need them.
Well, I mean, as shitty as social media is, you'll see stories like this and circles like this all the time where one author found their artist from seeing the cover of another artist and asking them or putting it out there. But first you got to get on there and get to know some people, follow them, chat back and forth, number one rule, don't be a dick of social media if you want to sell books. and get to know especially other authors. That can be extremely helpful. And very often these authors have websites. Sometimes they don't. I don't think Felix had one when we first got started, but he had an ArtStation page and some other stuff. So Rachel, do you have a website? Oh, your mic is muted.
There we go.
There you go.
No, actually, I don't have one right now. I have a portfolio on Behance.
Yeah, yes, Behance. That's the other one.
So
yes.
I sort of use that. And then apart from that, I just have my Instagram and my Twitter. A lot of like my work has come through word of mouth. So I've had a few people like reach out on those like channels, but mostly I've had people reach out and be like, oh, I saw your cover here, or I spoke to this person, they said you did this cover and, you know, such and such. So that's sort of how my work has sort of been coming in, which is great. It just means that I then keep putting off doing like a website or something like that, or updating like all those different channels, because I'm sort of like, oh, you know, I like to put that stuff off.
But people can contact you via messages on a social media platform?
Yeah, totally. A lot of the time I just get cold emails though, just coming in.
Yeah.
That's generally I have that information on my Behance. I have that information on my Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, a lot of people find it on there and then just shoot me a message.
Okay. Casey, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, a lot of people find me through my website. That's caseygerbercreative.com. And I also have an ArtStation page.
I looked at
Instagram,
that today.
Twitter. Oh, did you? Yeah.
It's very nice.
I'm pretty Googleable by name. But I'm different from some artists in this way. I really prefer that people email. I don't check my DMs often, and most artists who don't will say in their profile, "No DMs, please," because you know they just get lost in the void for some of us. So, but yeah, I really prefer an email. When I was doing more book covers, most of my work came through reedsy.com. I don't know if you guys have heard of that website, but it's a really nice place to find an artist and a designer, and even an editor if you need one, because the people on there are explicitly, you know, interested in doing book work and doing indie book work usually. I know a number of artists who would be great for book covers, but they can't do it, you know, for either time or, you know, interest or whatever constraints. So that makes Reedsy really nice to connect people with, you know, artists and authors who are kind of all interested in the same things. So
right. Alyssa, how do people get a hold of you, or do you prefer them to get a hold of you?
I also have a website, alyssawinans.com. I assume that's mainly what people use because people largely email me, and that's like the main place I have my email. Once in a while, I'll get like a DM on Instagram, but usually, if it seems like a serious inquiry, I'll point them over to the email, just because it's a little bit easier to flesh out details there. The mobile phone window is very narrow, so it's a little bit harder for me to kind of navigate that. But yeah, I think it's the website is how most people find me.
Cool. I just wanted to say too that if you go to Behance or ArtStation or those kinds of places, it's like, where do you start? Well, if you write fantasy romance, search fantasy romance art. If you're writing, you know, a dragon book, you know, search dragons. If you're writing, you know, whatever it is, just you can search by those kind of topics and subjects and find things that way too. I've also found artists just by asking other artists, you know, would you be available? If you're not, who do you know? And they all can rattle off 3 or 4. Felix actually just helped me out with that. I wanted to get a piece of concept art. And he couldn't do it, but he rattled off 3 names, and 2 of them were very interested, and I ended up picking one that I think is going to do really great on it. So that can work. That can work as well. And then I just found them out on ArtStation and Behance, actually. So now how, let's back up a little bit. You're a new author, you're writing a certain kind of book in a certain genre. How do you find out what kind of books or what kind of cover, style of cover that you're going to want? Mike?
As a writer, I mean, I usually have a visual. I usually want a scene from my book. I have an aesthetic. I know what I want, and I look for an artist with a style that will sort of match with that. And simply put, it's like heavy metal album cover.
A lot of them do look like that. Yeah.
To some degree, I just I'm doing it for me, and I want to like the cover, and so that's kind of what I mostly care about. And if other people like the covers and they sell books, and which seems to be the case, that's a lot of luck.
Yeah, the actually, do you this is one of Mike's most recent covers from one of Mike's more recent books, and I read this, Mike, by the way, Mike, and I've had nightmares ever since. Thanks. In a good way, though. So that is actually a scene from the
yeah,
it's terrifying. It's a big what did Alicia Wanstall-Burke call that? Oh, the big ouchie. She called that a big ouchie. Do you do your own design, Mike?
Nope. What I usually do is I talk to the artist, and they say, no, I don't do typography. And so I do it myself, and then I send it to them, and then they go, oh, okay, fuck. Yeah, I'll do it for you. And so far, that's worked every single time. I feel like he's like, I don't do typography. And then I'd send him my typography, and he'd be like, no.
Do you pay him a little more? Do you pay him a little? Do you pay him up a little? Pay him a little more for that?
Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
But that's kind of my take on that.
Okay, Isaac.
So I was in the same boat as Michael. I had an idea of a scene that was important to me and important to the story, and I described it, and I described the the setting that I wanted to see. And I'm more into let's say symbols, and so mine ended up being a pennant for a legion. So it was a little bit easier to.
So you went with the more symbolic cover. Okay, cool. As opposed to a full-on illustration, and you'll find that there are artists who specialize in one, and very often, like the full-on illustrators don't do the symbolic stuff. And that can go vice versa. There are some that cross back and forth, but you want to match the artist with the style that you're looking for. So when you contact somebody, you want to have a pretty good idea that they can do the style that you want. In fact, very often, actually, every time I've worked with an artist, I've looked at their work and said, I like this style, and give them the name of it, or even download it and upload it that you used in this, and that will work out. It will save you a lot of headache and time if you can do that, or show them other artworks. Show them other pieces you'd like this style. I want this kind of dragon similar to, because there are a lot of different kinds of dragons, right? But there's because there's a big difference in styles between like one artist, the way they draw dragons, another with the way they draw them, and then an anime style dragon, or any number of other, more of a kid's drawing kind of dragon. There are a lot of different kinds of things, and besides being different kinds of dragons. And you might say, I mean, in a lot of people say that in Game of Thrones, that's not actually a dragon. Those are actually wyverns because they don't have 4 legs, right? So you want to be specific about that kind of stuff. When to complete that story, Mike did give me John Anthony DiGiovanni's information, and we went on to work on 4 different covers and an illustration for the inside of one of my books. And I actually told him I want a big buffalo demon with a mace looming up with a guy with a lightning spear in front of him, and probably kind of a dark cityscape with some bats flying around in the background. I just told him that because it's urban fantasy, but it's myth based, and he did this. So he just is amazing. Now, part of it, we'll go through the steps and process, but what he'll do is send 4 or 5 sketches, and then I'll choose the pose and sketch, and then he'll just continue, and then we'll just add, color and stuff like that. And I told him I wanted a giant snake with a cobra hood holding scimitars with a guy in a suit with flaming swords, and still all in the in the Arctic, and he did that. So he's really good. And then I told him I wanted a 4-armed Hindu goddess with, kind of a Valkyrie in the front, and he did this. So we went through some sketches, and there were different poses and stuff. And then I use another guy that I use as a designer who does who actually did the typography and did the design on the front, spine, and back. So I was thinking we should talk about process, like how long does it take? What do you want first? What do you tell them you'll give them next? And how authors can make that process faster and easier for you. Alyssa?
Sure. First thing I love to receive is a contract. So that's like the very beginning. And then depending on what the author wants to give me, a brief or a manuscript, I personally prefer getting the manuscript. I don't know if everyone always wants to give it to me, but it gives me a better sense of the flavor of the book.
Do you read the whole book?
Yeah, usually.
See, that's actually quite rare. Most artists do not. John did read the first book because he was new and he had the time and he likes fantasy. So he did with this, but most of the time they don't.
Oh, well, I guess I have a little free time. Or
yeah.
I
think that's awesome. I think that's fantastic. But they can't expect. What I was going to say is that it's awesome if you find somebody who does. But as an author, don't expect that they'll be able to read your book. Okay. Because reading a book does take a long time.
Thanks for that clarification. I have had people send me both. And actually, I think that's ideal. If the person doesn't have time to read the manuscript, then they could just read the brief. It also gives probably the author a little bit more control over, like, here's the character descriptions like pulled out to make sure that nothing is missed.
Yep.
So that's nice to get. My process is pretty straightforward. I send usually 3 sketches. Then they can choose between them. If there's any revisions, I might do that. I'll do a color draft just to make sure the palette looks okay. And then usually I'll take it to final. Usually about a month to 5 weeks for me. But it also depends on the complexity. Like somebody's like, I want all of this stuff in there. I'm like, that's going to take a little bit longer. So I'll usually tell them from the front. If that's like, you can see the complexity in the brief, then I will tell them it'll probably take a little longer. But
are you comfortable sharing a price range of what you charge?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is typical, but I actually will vary my prices depending on who the client is, like whether it's an individual versus a small publisher or a large publisher. Most of my clients have been larger publishers, so I don't know if that skews my range, but it's usually between $1,000 and $4,000 for a front cover. Usually wraparound will be not always double, but a higher percentage of that. Yeah. If you want full rights buyout, I almost never have to do that, but it would be a double. Your price would double for that.
By wraparound, she means the front, spine, and back are one wide piece of art, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're doing like the dust jacket, then you do like you might have to do the flaps and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Casey?
So usually what I will do is I think of these projects as I'm sort of sharing the art director role with the client. And a lot of times my clients don't necessarily know how to write a brief. So if you're working with first-time authors, and it's very understandable. So I will go ahead and generally write a questionnaire. It's usually about 2 pages, and I will send that to the client. I also have my own contracts that I will send, and we can kind of negotiate and work out, what the finer points of those are. But basically that gives a pretty good idea of what information that I will need. I tend to prefer erring on the side of like bullet points and less information. I don't think I've ever read a manuscript. I'm a terribly slow reader, very visual person. I just can't do it. And when I was doing these projects, I was doing about 6 a month, and I would charge about $8.50 per. And generally, I would work with individuals rather than publishers. So that felt like a good, price range for them, where people wouldn't balk at that, but it also was reasonable for me.
Is that for both typography and illustration? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Rachel?
Yeah, I am a little bit like Alyssa and a little bit like Casey, in that my process is very much like Alyssa's in terms of like delivery with sketches and then moving to color and then moving to final. I also take about 3 to 4-ish weeks on average to sort of complete a project. But if I have a really like relaxed deadline, I might say I'm going to start this in like a month's time or something like that, and sort of communicate that with the author themselves. I prefer like briefs as well that are a little less information. I like the bullet points, easily digestible information. I also really like visual references in briefs. Like, I feel like sometimes it's hard to communicate through words, like exactly what you're meaning, especially like if an author's really wrapped up in their own sort of like story, like they know it in and out, but I don't. So, if they give me a sort of visual reference to go off, I'm like, okay, I get it. And then we're on the same page. In terms of like pricing, because I do a lot of Kickstarter special editions, my pricing, and for, indie authors, my pricing is a lot less because they're like one-time situations sort of thing, one-time print runs. And currently I'm charging about between 500 to 700. That depends on complexity, typography, all sorts of different things, but that is generally it. But I've been doing this for like just over a year now, like doing the special edition covers. So that's another thing too. If an artist is sort of just starting out, I'd expect them to probably charging a little bit less as they work sort of their portfolio up and, build up those projects.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, the range, the price range goes everywhere, all over the place. I mean, you can go to Fiverr and find, $50 covers, people who say they'll do one, or you can even go into Behance, and in particular, in a lot of foreign countries, artists are willing to work for, because the dollar goes a lot farther for them. But you have to consider, and sometimes you'll find the greatest treasures there, but it is like searching for gold, because it's not that easy, and very often just the communication problem can be a problem. they just quite don't get what you're saying. And that's another time when being able to give someone visual examples. This is the kind of art that I like in this style. This is the kind of cover I have, and I'm doing this genre. And then you can show them covers of books with typography that you like, right? Or that you think meets yours well. When you now again, you might sometimes find a great artist that you really want to work with, but they won't do the design. And designers can be much harder to find sometimes than artists. When it comes that do the typography, which means basically they can design fonts. They'll actually design the font and then do the layout, how everything works on the cover and on the spine and then on the back. And you have to give them that information, right? All that information, and they can be. I know. In my writers group, people that have written 30 books and done extremely well for themselves will suddenly go, everybody I used to use is too busy. They can't just do the design on my book. Oh, you guys have any ideas? And a lot of times ours are all real busy too. So it can be harder. So anybody have any advice on how to find designers? I mean, I've known people and myself resorted to just, getting on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and actually contacting an author I don't even know and say, would you mind telling me who did the design for the typography on the book? And that's not a terrible thing. They'll either answer you or you won't. But never bug them again. Ask them once, and if they don't reply, just leave them alone. Same with asking for someone if they mind reading your book for a review or whatever, or for a blurb. Just leave them alone after that. But people will respond, especially in the indie sphere. People are pretty good about helping each other out. We've all seemed to have kind of the rising tide lifts all ships kind of feeling, right? And I get that same idea among the artists and designers and people that work with indie authors. They'll quickly recommend, other artists if they can't do something. But if they're busy, then, that's not going to hurt them. It'd be silly. I know some people don't want to do that because they don't want someone else to find out what's going on, or to find someone else. But that I think seems kind of silly. Mike, what do you have to add about finding about any of this?
I think my process is a little different because so when I reach out to an artist, I like their style already. So I'm not going to say, oh, I want you to do it in this style. It's like you're going to do it in your style.
Yeah. But then there are people like Felix who can do like 8 different styles.
Yeah. For briefs, what I like to do is I'll pick 3 scenes from the book, and I'll just give them a really skeletal brief on 3 different scenes, and say which do you want to do? Because I'm not an artist, so I want the artist to sort of be excited about the project.
We know,
and also to pick the scene that they think is visually going to work the best. And so, if I give them 3 scenes, they're going to pick the one that will, they're excited to work on, and that's they can sort of visualize it. And sometimes, I remember one of the scenes I sent to Felix. He was like, "No, that's insane. Like, there's way too much shit going on. I had this huge panoramic, city and the docks and the aliens on the ship and just everything. It was too much." So that's how I like to work.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I just saw the latest thing he did for Andorida's special edition of the first Malazan book. It's insane. It's one of those panoramic things with a floating island and an army of something over here and something else going on down here. But he made it work. He makes it work. It's incredibly talented. Isaac, anything to add as so far?
Well, I think that I took your approach, and I'm part of a small group of writers called the Break-Ins, and got
Oh,
some
those
advice from
guys.
them on finding. Yeah, those guys. I got the invite and picked their brains on who would be good to work with. That wasn't on a short contract, and fortunately, they set me up with Stephanie Saw over at Seventh Star Art. So working with her now for the proper
Nice.
covers.
Cool.
So find community.
Yeah, it is. I know there are groups of artists out there who do book covers, and they'll do all kinds of things. And there's that other one where you can go in and people will put up their designs hoping you take theirs. I can't remember what that's called, and I don't know anyone who's actually gotten a cover from that, but I haven't heard anything bad about it. So you can just blindly search. That terrifies me. But it does work out for some folks.
So actually, a question for the artists, if I can. On the AI front, so I hired an artist for a book.
Oh yeah.
And he turned in AI generated stuff that he'd sort of worked over top. Do you include clauses like that in your contracts? How do you feel about all that? That side of the way things are going. Just anyone throw out.
I mean, I don't use it. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I don't use any AI sort of processes in my work. I personally don't like it. I'm not sure about other artists using it as the base for their work. I think the problem lies in that a lot of the work that AI produces, as I understand it, comes from pre-existing material. So a lot of the times, if an artist is generating base sketches via AI, then there is some sort of borrowing from original artwork. So I don't know, it makes me feel a little bit icky and I don't like sort of going near it. But, I don't know if I know enough about it to really talk about how other artists might be using it in their process.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say I think at this point in time, it is a big risk to publish something that is made with AI. My company does not allow us to use it because it is a legal risk. You are taking the chance, essentially, that some artist out there sees your work and goes, oh, hey, that looks just like my work. If it's anything that was created pre-2018, it's probably in the Lion 5B dataset. My name is in the list of artists that Midjourney recently came out with where they said, yeah, we have these people's work. If I see something that comes out and is published and people are making a profit on that looks too much like my work, I could sue them, And I think you're really running a risk with that. You're running a risk that, say, your work looks too much like something that Nintendo did, a big company could get wind of it. It really, I would really strongly recommend independent authors do not do that yet. Yeah. Until the whole thing with the data set gets worked out. It just doesn't feel worth it to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following a lot of that, like all of us have, and you'll see everything from an element from a piece of art is suddenly on somebody's cover, and it's like that is the rest of it's no different, but there's something right there that is exactly like this to downright plagiarism. I'm a professor, and if somebody takes a bunch of words from the internet and just copies and pastes them in, that's very obvious. But they go through and reword stuff, to a certain extent. Usually they make it worse, my students. But very often it's just a little bit different, but that's still plagiarism, right? So I've seen a bunch of pieces of art where it's obviously taken from this, but they've changed just a few things on it. And that can be pretty scary. Also, you run the risk of people, of people basically just harassing you about using AI art as a
Yeah, people might not buy your book.
Yeah.
because of that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No,
it's really
absolutely.
controversial.
And spread the word that way, or go in and review bomb you with a whole bunch of ones. I mean, it's not great that people will do stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of a cancel culture of sorts, but it can turn up against you. Mike had to like really fast. He didn't have to, but he wanted to replace his that
We
cover.
scrapped the cover, found a new artist.
Yeah.
And,
That was
I mean, it
smart.
was
It was a
last
scramble.
minute, very fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a scramble. Alyssa, anything
Yeah.
on that?
First off, Casey, I'm sorry that you're on that list. That sounds extremely stressful. Yeah, I'm more or less agree with everybody else. Like as it stands, it's all built on stolen work right now. And then I think I'm not in touch with the latest, but last I heard, you can't copyright AI material also. So that's another kind of risk depending on
that was
how you feel about copyright.
It depends on where you live. In China, you can. In the U.S., so far it seems like you maybe can't.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the update there. And then, yeah, lastly, I have seen artists who train models only on their own work, which seems to be a good tool for them to use. And so I was like, well, if it's their own work, I suppose they can do what they want with it. So I have seen some folks do that, but it's not something I've ever delved into because it just seems like a mess. And I actually enjoy doing all of the work myself, so I'm good. But
yeah, it's we've been talking quite a bit about the AI's writing books and getting better at actually writing books. And somebody's been putting a thing out. I mean, I got an email from this company, Impossible, without some of the letters in it. And what they're doing is offering, we'll take your books and your style, and we can help you put out 50 books a month. They actually say that. And it's all AI stuff, right? But it's like, if there's no trick to making a lot of money if all you want to do is make a lot of money. But we actually happen to like writing books, and we'd like to continue to be able to make a living doing that and not losing it to somebody who's just really good at prompting, so yeah, we live in a strange time as far as that stuff goes. So what have we not touched on that we think we should probably talk about?
Actually, Alyssa, I think, brought up something earlier that I hadn't given much thought. So you sell your art separately if the author wants exclusive rights. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
Do you have different prices?
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. We're talking about a total buyout of copyright. Yeah.
Right.
You usually don't need this in the book world, honestly, but like in like IP world and like corporate stuff, often like work for hire, they call it, where the creator will lose the copyright because it'll be bought out by whoever's commissioning it. That'll usually be a double price range, which it honestly doesn't come out much here in Bookland because there's not need for copyright transfer. But
I'd always kind of assumed afterwards that I owned the art. Now I don't really care if the artist sells prints, puts it on their website and stuff like that, but I hadn't actually really given it that side of it that much thought. Not that it hasn't mattered.
Yeah,
but,
the general contract. See, none of the artists I've ever worked with actually wanted a contract. They've never said they wanted to work with a contract. The only contract I've ever had was with John, working with John Anthony DiGiovanni on the first Paternus book, and that was a work for hire contract, and he signed it, and he probably shouldn't have. But what that meant was that I do own the copyright, but he was brand new and worked out. Now, of course, he could sell prints. He could do whatever he wants with it. I don't care. But the general contract is that if you want to use that, like if I wanted to use this art again for something else, right? Say Tradpub said they wanted to pick this up and wanted to use that art, they'd need to pay him something again. Or if it was going to appear in a best of indie art cover book on Kickstarter or something like that, people running that Kickstarter would need to pay him something again, right? Am I getting this right, artists?
Yeah,
Okay.
depending on what like usage rights you sign as well, because they can keep the copyright, but you
Yeah,
can.
but if there's no contract, and I have to believe that very many there is no contract. So what's the assumption?
Yeah,
Because the way the law works is that it falls back to an assumed contract, right?
Yeah, if you're working without a contract, I think that's very risky for you as an author, because you may run into an artist who realizes like, oh, I could probably get royalties on this, and who may like come back and try to get royalties from you. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you just don't know unless you really communicate about it. And I think like I would never work without a contract, because the idea is just it's just too iffy. Like you don't know what's going to happen.
The artists have just never asked. They've never brought it up.
I mean, when you're new, a lot of that stuff isn't covered. If you're self-taught, like it's a big empty spot in a lot of people's education. So I don't blame anybody for sure. But for you all, like I think it actually is important, because like, for example, that artist could just go around and put that cover on somebody else's book in your same thing and just have a different title on it. And that would, I don't know, that might feel very sad.
That would suck.
Yeah. So it's mutually beneficial in my opinion.
Right. Okay. All right.
Note to self, contracts.
Yeah. Note to self. Exactly. Isaac, did you have a contract?
Sorry.
No.
Everyone
You didn't have one either. We're all going, uh-oh.
I'm scared for you
I might
guys.
go write an email after this.
Right now, our artists are listening, are watching this going.
Yeah.
But now, the prices can range a lot. I mean, I've seen beautiful work done on book covers for $200 from new artists or from different countries. And I've seen, I know quite a few authors who don't have any problem paying $2,000 to $3,000 to get their covers done. It depends on how well they feel their books will do. Generally, beginning new authors don't have that kind of money to put out, so they have to just keep looking until they can find somebody who's interested in doing that. But yeah, don't be too terrified, but don't cheap out on your cover. Save some money, because it does make a huge difference. But don't be mortified that you won't be able to afford something, because you will be able to find someone and something that you will like. So what else should we be covering? It's about 8:00.
Can I add something onto your statement just now?
Absolutely.
Now this is totally personal opinion, but a good designer. Sorry, I know I'm coming from the illustration side, so maybe this is like my advice, but good designers are really worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the number one thing that I'll notice if the illustration's gorgeous, but the design is like not good. I will be like, oh no, you know.
The font is terrible, and it's
like,
not
oh, your
placed
comic
very
sans,
well.
like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know there are a lot of people that think they can do it themselves, and they really should not to be. I mean, one thing I would tell any beginning author is pretend that you are a terrible judge of art, terrible, and design, and let your artists and designers do what they know, right? Do what they do best. Because I'm convinced, for example, that I have no idea. I don't listen to audiobooks, and the ones I do listen to, I just don't like them because I don't like to hear books turned into cartoons, and it drives me crazy, the overdramatic readings. But that's what everybody wants. So I am out of touch and clueless when it comes to that. I absolutely believe and know and have met some authors who say, "Oh, look at my new cover. It's so cool." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a piece of crap." You know, some people don't have a good judge, aren't a good judge of cover art. So try to get something in the genre that looks that your artist, and run it past as many people as you can, because they will tell you, hopefully, that that's really not good.
And something I can add on the graphic design front is that a professional graphic designer will manage font licenses for you. This is something that's another like legal thing that I think a lot of people don't think about. Just because you found a font on a free website doesn't mean you can publish it. So like a professional graphic designer will have a library of fonts that they have paid for the desktop license for. They will manage that for you and make sure that you don't get into trouble. They will know things about how to prepare the files for print. They will know things about spacing. They will make sure the typography looks professional, like Alyssa said. So really important, I think, just seconding that, to like find a professional. Yes, they need to be licensed for both print and digital. It is true.
And they'll come up with cool ideas like putting the hand out in front of the font, right? I never would have thought of that.
For sure. And like with font licenses,
and they'll know how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, like, if you are putting a font on your cover, that is not the same kind of license as putting it in your book. There is a different license for reflowable fonts versus for desktop fonts, which is basically like you're putting it in a static graphic versus an ebook where it's reflowing, and they need to have the font to do that. So, you know, a good graphic designer will manage all of that for you, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know.
On that front too, which I keep running into because bad planning. I love full fold around covers. I love them. And then I've got all this amazing detail on the back cover because the artist just did fantastic work. But now I've got to figure out how to actually like put text back there and to make it readable.
I'm going to cover it all up.
Thousands of colors and all this stuff going on. It's like, I probably should have thought about this ahead of time. So that artist would be it's good for doing that.
Yeah, John did a really cool thing on this one where he's got, I'm sorry, there's glare on it. Let me turn this off. Oh, that didn't help at all. But there are characters here and up, and then so up this side. So then he was working with the designer, and so they did it like that. But very often it's just, you know, just something like this. We decided to go with just a generic lightning and the orange reddish sky, so it could go wherever the designer wanted to put it. But they are worth their weight in gold. You're absolutely right. The designers. So one more round. Anything that anyone else wants to bring up? Otherwise, we will go to the comments. And I'm telling everyone who's watching, what are your questions? But first, anything else you guys want to add right now?
I feel like your question of how to find a designer never quite got answered.
Okay. Yeah,
Read Z is a good resource. You can look at LinkedIn. There's also a website called Dribble. Yeah, LinkedIn. There's also a website called Dribble that is specifically like a design portfolio site.
So say I go into LinkedIn. What do I do? Just search?
Search in the search bar.
Yeah, but search what?
Freelance graphic designer. is
There you go.
probably what, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of graphic designers are sharing their work on there.
You could
know,
probably
looking
even
for
try
leads.
freelance book design if you wanted.
Yeah, totally.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
big recommend for that.
Yeah, and we're not even getting into interior formatting, and there are designers who do that too.
Yeah, and the advantage on
that's a
LinkedIn is
different thing.
you can see their whole resume. You know, you can see if they've done interiors or covers or agency work or what have you.
Now, for my books, I just use vellum for the interior formatting. It's not fancy, but nobody's complained. Nobody's going, ooh, the interior is really cool, like they do with other people's books. But I don't think it changes. Now on Kickstarter, or you're doing special editions kind of stuff, then I got an interior formatter and designer to help me with those if you're doing fancy stuff. But it's just, if it's just the paperbacks out, you don't have to worry so much. But that's for another panel. We're not really going into this. So I'm going to go back. There's someone from some place called FanFiAddict. Who are those guys? Says also fonts need to be licensed for both print and digital. Which is true unless, I mean, on Kindle doesn't matter because they can just change the fonts. I mean, you just put it in Times New Roman or whatever, and the Kindle just changes it to whatever font you want to use. So what digital are they talking about? Do you know?
It depends on how you're distributing your book.
Okay.
If you're talking about Kindle, it's possible that Amazon handles the font licensing and that they have purchased licensing according to their huge distribution needs.
They must have, because I can go on
yeah.
my Kindle and just change the font, and I'm sure they
Yeah.
have the right to that font.
Yeah, that's probably what they're doing. But if you're distributing an ebook, say, on your website or on Gumroad or any of these other places where you're totally independent,
right?
If you make an EPUB, the font needs to be reflowable. So,
or I suppose if you were putting out PDF versions,
yeah,
that'd be digital. So yeah, that would be you'd need the license for that too. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. Or if you're making a visual novel game, a lot of people do that. You gotta have your app license.
Some people saying, "Oh, never dawned on me to draw up a contract with my artist." Yep. I don't see any questions coming in, any real questions coming in yet. So we can just talk about whatever we want. Yeah, scrolling up. I don't really see a lot of questions. The last comment I see is, I came in so late, I'll have to watch the replay. So I'm not seeing a lot of questions. Oh, here's one. It looks like our FanFiAddict moderator is helping us out here. And there's one from some guy named Bengali. I have no idea who that is, but I'll go to this one first. Bert Struble asks, do you put any marks on it so it can't be reused? I'm assuming like a hidden mark or something on the artwork? Like a watermark or something? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either, but I wouldn't consider putting that on if I was like giving over a cover to an artist. I know like that's a problem with AI though, that I've seen, that a lot of like watermarks, because if artists are putting these on their portfolio, they will put a watermark over to sort of stop it being stolen, and then that watermark gets skewed and turns up a little bit in AI work. So
that's smart.
But I think
you can't really do it on a book cover though.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think if you're like selling that art to an author for their cover, then that's that's their cover. I wouldn't be putting anything in there to make it mine at that point.
Okay. Yeah, and in a legal sense.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in a legal sense, you as the author with your cover are protected by copyright. as long as you have a contract. It might be the artist if you don't have a contract, but yeah, any originally created visual or written work is protected by copyright at creation. So yeah, no need for a watermark.
Okay. Mike, what were you going to say?
I was thinking, you know, back to, you know, the fantasy book covers in the 70s and 80s. I'm that old. I kind of miss how artists used to sneak their signatures into the work.
Yeah.
Like I never see that anymore.
Yeah.
And I've with I think with every artist I've talked to, like hired, I'm fine with that. I'm like, yeah, you can't just sort of slap a big old signature on it, but like if you want to like work it in there, or if you've got a symbol or whatever that kind of works for you, like totally cool with that. But
yeah,
I miss that.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sneak it in. You know, like there are some like little glyphs along on this thing. You just put, if he just would have put a JAD in there, I'd have been thrilled with that, you know?
Yeah.
Any other comments on that, Alyssa? Okay. Ben had a good question, actually. I'm shocked. What are some of your favorite book covers and book cover designs? I mean, anybody, Isaac, Mike, but I'm always particularly interested. Can you guys name a book or two that you just love the cover and the design?
I'd actually rather hear from the artists.
I can.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah. Alyssa?
Right now, I'm really into Sijo Hong's covers. I first saw her work. I feel really bad because I'm not going to get the author and I'm not going to get the title, but it's like a Tea and Poison series, two books. I hope somebody can look that up right now. I'll go look it up.
Somebody's looking right now.
Okay, good. Because I do want to make sure that folks get credit for that. I just don't
Ben,
know
get on that.
Names. Yeah. If folks don't get it, I'll put it in the chat later. But they really caught my eye. They're really bright and colorful and beautiful and ambient. And I think for a long time there was very colorful like fantasy covers for a long time, and then it kind of got a little bit like dark and gritty for a little bit, and I think now we're getting back to the color stuff, so it caught my attention. I was like, oh,
is it called A Magic Steeped in Poison?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, that's FanFiAddict.
Nice.
To the rescue. And what was the artist's name again?
Sijo Hong. I hope I'm saying her name right. Sijahong.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Casey, do you have some favorites?
Yeah, I do have some favorites. I'm one of those book collector people. So I really love the recent hardcover edition of Ursula Le Guin's Tales of Earthsea. It has just the most gorgeous illustration on it. And then in the indie sphere, Spiridon Ganakis is doing incredible design work on indie art books mainly. He did Evan Mail Amundsen's Decade book, a number of just really fantastic examples of design in indies.
What's that name again?
Spiridon Ganakis.
Spiridon. I love that's a great name. I'm putting that in my next book.
I'm sure he'd love that.
Rachel, what are some of your faves?
Well, I'm a little bit more leaning towards sort of foil covers and a lot of the stuff that I've seen on Kickstarter. I really love the Mark of Kings special edition, and especially the typography there. But also Dragon Mage, the special edition as well. I really like the colors on that. There's a lot of beautiful special editions that, you know, are being made now. So it's hard to keep up with all the different, exactly that. Yeah. And the spine is really like with the, that's it. Yeah.
And then on the back is the same. And of course it's got the foil.
Yeah. And Zach Argyle's Fredlight as well is one that, you know, a lot of people, when they've reached out to me, have sort of like mentioned that as, I don't know, like a base for like where they want to like go for theirs. And yeah, I have to agree. It's really like nice and intricate on like the details and the border, and yeah, just really well done.
Yeah, there's So much beautiful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could have it all, but I would be poor, very, very, very poor. So Mike, we've heard from the artists. Do you have any you really love?
I'm still a sucker for the old school fantasy stuff, like Michael Whalen. I don't know the artist, like the old Stormbringer books, the Elric stuff. I love that, and I combine that aesthetic with sort of like modern heavy metal album art, and that just makes me happy.
Right. Go ahead, Isaac, and while you're talking, I'm going to grab a couple and get some opinions here.
Yeah, I'm obviously new to looking for artists and designers, but I would say Felix's work, like on Adrian's book and Rob's book. I have a copy of Pathlighter here. As much as there aren't symbols on it, I'm a huge fan of the art. But my all-time favorite, and I'm embarrassed now that I haven't looked it up, but is Pierce Brown's. I just loved the wing. Thought it was beautiful. So big fan of anything that's just simple and clean.
So just Jonathan French won the SPFBO when I was in it back in 2016 with the Gray Bastards. And this is the cover that he had by Raymond Swandland. Talk about old school, just insane kind of stuff. That's one of the orc riders on a giant hog. And that's what the book looked like. Then he got picked up by a traditional publisher, and he is still very angry because they did this instead of using that art.
With man bun.
And that's, it's a photo, a touched up photo. And it's not what do you guys think? Was that a terrible idea? As far as art, now they're trying to make decisions as far as getting a different audience and trying to bring audience in and all that kind of stuff. So there is a difference in the way they look at it. But what are your opinions, between the two?
A lot of the indie stuff just looks better to me. I guess we're putting more money into it than they are. They're more.
Well, these days, yeah, that's actually true. Which is crazy, right?
There are a lot of, and for huge authors, there are a lot of really bad traditional covers, and I am confused. Like they must have a bigger budget than I do. But
yeah, I could understand artists if you'd rather not respond and make trad people angry if you might want to work with them someday, but if you don't, what do you think between the two? Casey, do you have an opinion, or would you rather plead the fifth?
Oh no, I work in video games. We love traditional publishing, but I would say it really depends on the audience they're trying to pick up. Like, I don't think there is anything about illustration that is inherently better than photography for marketing. I think you're right, Dyrk, that they made some calculations on their end as to, and they possibly focus grouped it. Like, it's tough to say what goes on behind the screen, but they probably had their reasons, and I don't think it necessarily makes a better or worse cover. It just depends on who you're trying to grab with it, basically.
Okay. Rachel, Alyssa, any comments?
Truthfully, I mostly work on the traditional publishing side, and that doesn't give me any particular insight into how they make those decisions per se. I've always wondered myself, is like, why did they pick me? Who's looking at my work? Who likes my work? And I have a little bit of stats on my own of like, certain demographics probably like my work, but yeah, I'd agree with Casey. There's probably some sort of math that lives beyond us. I mean, I have a personal preference towards more illustrated work, but that is personal, you know, it's a subjective thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's hard to object. Now, we've all seen covers, however, that are objectively bad on the trad pub side and on the indie side. I know that. Now, I'm not going to ask you to name any of those, but Rachel, any comment?
I mean, yeah, I again don't know how they sort of make their decisions behind the screen. They obviously like have their reasons. Again, I have a personal preference between those two covers that you showed. I prefer obviously the more illustrated one, but again, it is so down to personal preference and personal style and what people go for and what's sort of like trending at the minute. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you see some bad covers. But it's hard to know if like that is just your personal take on things. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Another Rachel says, actually, ties right in. Have any of you artists noticed ongoing trends or changes in trends, differences in indie versus trad covers, and maybe thoughts as to why? Of course, you may feel you've already answered that, but
I think like book talk is definitely having, or it definitely was having a little bit of an influence in terms of what was going sort of getting shared the most on there. And then there was a big sort of lean towards similar sort of covers and similar sort of styles based on that, but it ebbs and flows so much.
Yeah.
You know, it will be like that for a couple of months and then all of a sudden it's like switch back to something else. So, you know, it's like public opinion changes so quickly.
Yeah, I'll see covers in the trad sphere switch from illustrated to more photo, realistic, and from either of those to more iconic, symbolic symbols, either like a large symbol or, heavily designed, but it's all kind of just symbols. So it's not a scene or an image of something in particular. And then there was the kind of red and black. Everything that came out was in fantasy was red and black for a long time. You probably remember that. But yeah, everything goes in phases, and it can be hard. What really sold a lot of like fantasy romance books 5 years ago might not be what's selling a lot of fantasy romance today, right? Now, I keep bringing up fantasy romance because even though none of us here and most people I know don't write fantasy romance, those are the biggest selling books in the fantasy genre by far, and a couple of friends of mine do actually write that. And do very well for themselves. Any predictions for future trends in book-related art? Where do you think it's going to go next? Particularly, we're talking mostly fantasy and science fiction kind of stuff, of course.
I don't know. I can't keep up. Also, I'm not on TikTok, so I'm not even on the cutting edge. So
me neither.
Yeah, I'd love to see like
I just watch a lot of the new releases
come back. I'd love to get I want to hire an artist to do like an oil painting for a book cover. Like screw digital, like screw AI, so I think probably out of my budget, but that I'd love to see that sort of make a comeback, I mean really old school. I've talked to a couple artists about doing that, and most of them are like, I don't have time to hand paint a book cover for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really don't have any predictions. Only that, in my belief, tread covers will get cheaper. And they may even start using AI kind of stuff. There's already been some talk about that with one of the publishers. It was a big brouhaha last week on social media. So the for the artists, was there a cover you are the most proud of that you've done, that you've worked on? Your very favorite? So we could go look it up.
I've got one. Glitched by Tiffany Yao. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, it was a good one. It came together easy because we were so clear on the vision, and it just, I feel like it's very striking. I love it so much. And she was great to work with too.
Cool. I'm going to look for it. Glitched. Alyssa?
I've got it.
Oh,
so
cool.
I've got The Empress of Soul and Fortune by Nevo. Honestly,
that is cool.
This was really early days. Like, I think I'd done under 5 covers when this one first came along, and I didn't know it was going to be a series when I designed this first book. So kind of, I accidentally set kind of the template for the rest of the series, and it's been a really marvelous, The Singing Hill Cycle by Nevo, marvelous series to work on since then. So
can you hold the image the illustration a little bit closer?
Sorry.
That's
so it has sentimental value for me, which
it's nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
Rachel?
For me, I think,
and you don't have to say one of Ben's books.
I'm not going to. Sorry, Ben. I think for me, doing Matt Larkin's The Ragnarok Prophecy special edition last year, I really enjoyed doing that because I really enjoyed doing like the Norse knot work and working. I really like sort of Norse design elements.
It was beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. And I thought when I looked at it, once I'd made the mock-up, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm really, really pleased with that. I think it's, it's bold, it stands out, and I really enjoyed the typography on that as well. A lot of the times with my typography work, it's as opposed to like font manipulation, I'll like add like hand-drawn sort of swishes and everything, and so that was a really nice one that was sort of very organic and more hand-drawn than others that I've worked on. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with how it turned out.
Nice. I failed to give the shout out to my typographer and designer, Sean T. King from STK Creations. He's got a website. He's also one of the busiest designers that I know. So don't be surprised if he either can't do it or it will be months and months and months. Yeah, and especially it's a good idea to give yourself 6 to 8 months to a year to get this stuff together, talking to the artists here, to get it going, because you never know how long it can take or what could go wrong. So yeah, don't try to get, don't do what Mike had to do and have to scrounge and find somebody new and get something going within a week and have it done like a week after that. That's no fun.
Yeah, I think that's super important to add on to that, because I've had a few authors reach out to me and like their timeline is super short, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I just can't help you right now. Whereas if I had a little bit more time to like fit it into my schedule, then totally. So give yourself as much time as possible to really focus on what you need to get done, and then find out what's possible.
That's smart. One thing that I have noticed, that new artists getting into it, they get all excited and they're like, wow, this is awesome, and they take on more than they can chew very early on. And you guys might have, I'm sure, have more to, so they'll schedule themselves far too tightly thinking they could get more done because they just like, this is working, I could make a living doing this. But if they end up being 2-3 months late, word spreads, you know, and that can hurt. That can hurt if that happens. So if there are any just starting designers or artists out there, that's something to keep in mind. If you're good, you'll be okay. People will come to you and keep coming to you. Don't try to try to be very realistic. And it's okay to say, yeah, I can do this, but it's going to be August before I can start it, and probably first week of September before I can finish it. You know, it's okay to do that. And then people either will say, all right, and you might be surprised how many do, the ones that are experienced and have been around and know. And the ones that get all pissed off and run away might not be people you want to work with in the first place, right? So it's 8:30. We did it. Anything else you want to say? Isaac, pitch your book to us. Tell us where, when, and where can they find it?
Well, it's just going through its last edit. So once I get a final cover, it'll be up on Amazon. You can sign up to my newsletter, and I'll let you know when it's ready for pre-order at Isaac Hill Author. Yep. Put it up as soon as it's ready at IsaacHillAuthor.com.
Okay, and you'll have a pre-order link up and everything on Amazon. Awesome. Mike, what do you got coming out?
I think the next thing will be Dust of the Dead. I got like another week to wrap up first draft and then into edits. And
is that first in a new series or one of the ongoing?
Yeah, so what I'm doing with this one, it's a standalone. But the plan is to write a bunch of standalones in the same world. Mm-hmm. Just to take a break from trilogies, because by book 3, I'm always losing my mind. But, MichaelRFletcher.com. I'm around.
My newest thing that came out is a co-authorship with David Estes. Kraken Rider Z is out now. Came out in November. Book 2 will be out this November. Fingers crossed. And that is more Sean T. King typography and design, and the art is by Daniel Camarudin, who is very, very good at this style and several other styles as well. And that is on Amazon right now. And then there's the Paternus Trilogy, which I've shown everybody. That's up, including a full trilogy compilation ebook on Amazon, and the entire trilogy in one audiobook on Audible. So that's me. Thank you, everybody. Rachel, Casey, Alyssa, anything else you want to add for where we did kind of talk about where people can find you, but anything else you want to jump in with?
I'll plug the next book I cover coming out. I think Red Sight by Meredith Mooring comes out February 27th.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Space magic. Pretty neat. I didn't get the manuscript for it, so I'm excited to read it too.
Oh, good.
Find out.
Good. That's exciting, I'm sure, for the author, knowing that you're excited to read a book. Casey?
Yeah, I don't have anything to plug, but for those of you who are publishing a book, I'm very excited for you. It's super fun. Yeah, good luck. Wishing you all the best. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks. Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a few Kickstarters right now, but I don't want to say too much about them because they haven't gone live or pre-launched or whatever. So keep an eye out. I'll be around, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what social media are you on, artists?
I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram, but mostly Twitter at Claymore Covers. Yeah.
Okay. Casey?
Yeah, I pretty famously dislike social media. I don't post a lot, but I am on ArtStation, Instagram, Twitter. You're welcome to follow me if you feel the need.
Okay. Alyssa?
I have a Twitter and an Instagram, but I'm probably most active on Instagram. ALA Winans.
I found you today.
Oh, thanks. Great.
And tagged you in a post. Authors are easier to find because, you know, we're shilling things constantly. I know Isaac is on everything. Mike's on everything pretty much. All right. Well, we better go. It's 8:35. Thank you, FanFiAddict, for having us. And thank you all for putting up with me for this. Best of luck in everything. I'm sure I'll be talking to at least a few of you again very soon. But thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for hosting it. Nice to meet y'all.
Thanks. Thank you.
You folks
And
as
I'll
well.
talk to you soon, Mike.
Yeah.